You know, boys, it takes a lot for me to change my day-to-day builds. I'm not out here uploading build videos left and right that only really work in very rare scenarios or very specific activities / circumstances. If I upload a build video or build videos, it's because I genuinely use them and I think that they're worth sharing. Hence, why there hasn't been a build video here on the channel for a few months, because what I've been using, I've already talked about, and they haven't really changed. That is, until this season. This season has introduced a ton of really good weapons and really good mods, and as of about a week ago, I have officially changed my go-to builds, and that's what I'm going to be showcasing in this video. The main build that I'm going to be showcasing is going to be great for day-to-day activities and just general gameplay, and the variations of it that I'm also going to be showcasing will even be viable for high-level in-game activities. But I haven't even talked about the best part yet. You can use this build and its variations no matter what class you're rocking, so Hunter, Titan, Warlock, you can use this. So without wasting any more of your time, let's get into it. First up, let's talk about the 3 essentials that make up a good build. I have been preaching these 3 essentials for what feels like forever, but for anyone that doesn't know, I'll quickly go over them again. You first need a weapon for ad clearing. This is normally your primary weapon. A weapon for group clear / single target damage. This is normally your special weapon. And finally, a weapon for boss damage. This is normally your heavy weapon. Now, notice how I said normally your X weapon, and that's because sometimes a single weapon can actually overlap into these different categories. For example, Izanagi's Burden is great for single target damage like majors, ultras, and champions, but it's also great for boss damage. So yeah, you can have a weapon that's good for multiple things. In fact, it's actually really good if a weapon that you're using is good for a multitude of different things. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because A, I think it's important to know if you're creating your own build. B, if you're rocking a build that has these 3 essentials, then you're pretty much set to take on anything in the game. And C, it's going to be heavily integrated into my own builds, the builds that I'm going to be talking about today. Speaking of my builds, let's get into them. So first, let's talk about the base build. Then we'll talk about the variations of it depending on what you need and what activities you're playing. The base build is going to consist of Wither Horde for group clear / single target damage, the Akilos SMG for ad clear, and Hezen's Vengeance for boss damage. Now, Wither Horde can also work for boss damage because of its tick damage capabilities, its background damage, and Hezen's can also be used for single target damage. Now, these weapons do a whole lot more, but I'll explain that as I go through the mods. Of course, I'm not going to be talking about, like ammo mods like Finder, Reserves, and Scavenger, as it's pretty obvious you should be using those. I'm going to be talking about the other mods, The first mod is going to be Blast Radius, which isn't new to the game, but it is available in your artifact this season for a whole lot less energy than just the normal version. Blast Radius is going to charge with light when you rapidly defeat enemies with grenade launchers and rocket launchers, which you're going to be using both a grenade launcher and a rocket launcher. So fire off a few Wither Horde shots and bam, you're charged with light. The next mod is going to be Protective Light. Now, this mod isn't really, essential to the build. It's just an all-around good mod that I recommend everyone run, as it's pretty much just a safety cushion for you. Because of Wither Horde and Blast Radius, you're almost always going to be charged with light, meaning if you happen to get in a sticky situation where you're about to die, this mod is going to activate, consume all your charges of light or charges with light, and give you a massive damage resistance. This should give you enough time to get to cover and get your health back, preventing a death. Now, the other mod that is also going to use your charges with light is going to be Argent Ordnance. Now, just like Blast Radius, this mod is not new to the game, but it is available in your artifact this season for a whole lot less energy than just the normal version. Essentially, when you're charged with light, readying or firing a rocket launcher is going to grant a 20% damage buff and an increase to reload speed. Once you do damage an enemy with a rocket, it's going to consume 1 stack of your charge with light. Now, a final thing to note about this mod is when it's being used in conjunction with a lasting impression rocket, so a rocket that has the lasting impression perk on it. Pretty much what's going to happen is the bonus damage from this mod is going to be used by the direct impact and not the actual explosion. So if you're charged with, let's say, 1 stack of light and you fire at an enemy, the direct impact damage is going to do 20% more damage, and your charge with light is going to be consumed before the rocket actually explodes. Now, that really sucks, but there is 2 ways around this. One is to fire the rocket next to the enemy on the wall or the floor, so the damage bonus will be applied to the explosion instead of the direct impact damage. But you'll lose the direct impact damage, and the bonus damage being applied to the explosion is not going to make up for the missing impact damage. This scenario only somewhat makes sense if you're clearing ads, but I mean, who clears ads with a rocket? Now, the second way, and the way that I use it, is to be charged with 2 stacks of light. And of course, you can default get 2 stacks of charge with light from any mod that will charge you with light. So yeah, you can always get 2 stacks of charge with light. And then you just damage a boss / single target. This way, your first stack is consumed from the direct impact, and your second stack is consumed by the explosion. This way, you're going to be getting 20% more on the direct impact and 20% more on the actual explosion. Now, remember, all that only affects you if you're actually using a rocket with lasting impression. Now, the next mod is going to be Global Reach because, well, we will be using warmind cells. This mod is going to enable the warmind cells that you generate to affect and damage enemies at a greater distance. Now, we are going to be using another warmind cell mod, but if we weren't, then this mod would also allow us just in general to create warmind cells with our Aquilos SMG. Essentially, if you're using an Aquilos SMG or just really any weapon like a 7th Seraph or any Aquilos weapon, you must use at least one warmind cell mod to enable your Aquilos weapon, or just, your weapons that can create these cells, to actually create these cells. Every 5 kills with the weapon will generate a cell unless the enemy you're killing is an ultra or yellow health bar. Then it's a guaranteed cell spawn on kill. Now, the other warmind cell mod that I just mentioned is going to be Wrath of Rasputin. This mod is going to enable solar splash damage to generate warmind cells. So if you're running a solar subclass that has splash damage like solar grenades, then this mod will allow warmind cells to be generated via solar splash damage. Also, yes, this will enable Hezins to generate cells. And the final mod is going to be Breach and Clear. This is a new mod to the game this season that can be found in your seasonal artifact. This mod reads, when using a grenade launcher, damaging a boss, damaging a champion, or breaking a combatant's shield reloads your stowed weapons and causes the combatant to take increased damage for a short duration. Now, the whole reloading your weapons is great, but the big thing is the increased damage. The increased damage is going to be a 30% debuff and is going to last for about 10 seconds. There's also a visual effect that can be seen when this mod activates. The boss / champion / enemy that you broke the shield will glow purple throughout the duration of the increased damage window. So now that you know what the build is, let's quickly run through the gameplay flow of it. The Aquilos and Witherhoard are going to be used in conjunction with one another for low tier ads and most majors. Run into some ads and fire a Witherhoard shot on the ground, then immediately swap to your Aquilos SMG. As long as you're holding the Aquilos SMG, any kills with your Witherhoard, the stuff that's on the ground, will have the same ability to generate warmind cells, as if the kills were coming directly from your Aquilos. After you do swap to your Aquilos and begin either laying into a major or some of the lower tier ads, you'll eventually hear the auto load activate for your Witherhoard, assuming that you have the catalyst. At this point, you'll just pull it back out and fire again. Rinse and repeat till everything in the room / area is dead, which shouldn't take long because you'll be generating warmind cells all day long. Also, I mentioned how Witherhoard has auto loading thanks to the catalyst, and with the way that you're going to be using it, you should never ever have to actually reload it. It is a pull out, fire one shot, then switch to something else weapon. Now, when facing a boss, it's kind of the same gist. You just open up with a Witherhoard shot, which will proc Breach and Clear. You'll also then start ticking the boss for damage thanks to Witherhoard, and then the increased damage from Breach and Clear will up that damage even more. And then at this point, there's a 99% chance that you'll be charged with light ×2, so you then just pull out Hezins and go to work with bonus damage from Breach and Clear, and your first 1 to 2 shots will also have bonus damage thanks to Argent Ordnance being active. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Witherhoard plus Aquilos plus warmind cells for ad clear / group clear, and Witherhoard plus Hezins for single target damage / boss damage. Also, don't forget that this season has Overload SMG, so you can always run that with this build if you need to. Now, the other variation of this build would be to switch Aquilos to Fatebringer with Firefly, Witherhoard to Salvage or Salvo, and you can keep Hezins on or swap to Deathbringer with Catalyst. This way, you don't need to change any of the mods at all. Fatebringer with Firefly is still going to generate warmind cells via the solar explosion with Wrath of Rasputin. Salvage or Salvo is still going to activate Blast Radius and Breach and Clear, and of course, Hezins or Deathbringer is going to do tons of damage thanks to Breach and Clear along with Argent Ordnance. The only mod you might have to change is if you were running Overload SMG, but thankfully Overload Hand Cannon is a thing this season, and if you just so happen to have explosive payload on your Firefly Fatebringer, then it's only going to take 2 shots to activate overload. Now, I know I just said that you wouldn't have to change any of the mods, but if you are having problems generating warmind cells with Fatebringer's Firefly Explosion, because, well, I mean, it's really going to depend on the ad density. If your, Fatebringer's Firefly is actually going to be able to kill enough things to generate some cells, then you could swap out Breach and Clear for Energy Accelerant. This way, your Firefly Explosion is going to do more damage, which could lead to more kills and more warmind cell spawns. It's also going to inadvertently increase your Salvager Salvo chain reaction damage as well. Now, like I said, you are going to have to swap out Breach and Clear, so I mean, that does kind of suck, but I mean, if someone else on your team is running it, then I guess you really don't need it anyway. Now, building off that variation, you could swap Salvagers for Deafening Whisper and Wrath of Rasputin for Warmind's Decree. Doing this is going to allow you to generate Warmind cells with Void Splash damage, which Deafening Whisper being a Void Waveframe, well, yeah, you can see where this is going. Also, if you did decide to swap Hezens to Deathbringer in the variation I talked about previously, then that would also generate Warmind cells. Now, because your Warmind cells are coming from your Deafening Whisper and Deathbringer, you could swap out Fatebringer to an AR like Chroma Rush or something if you needed like an anti-barrier weapon. It completely depends on what you need and what activity that you're currently running. You don't need Fatebringer anymore to generate cells. If you want to keep Fatebringer on because you like Fatebringer, then go for it, but it's not absolutely needed. Now, quickly going back to the base build, if you are doing a higher level activity that requires staying alive, then I'd recommend a Blinding GL. They're seriously underrated and I don't think enough people use them. So from the base build, just swap Witherhoard for Ignition Code with Blinding Grenades. You could also now swap Hezens to Deathbringer because your exotic weapon slot is free, but I mean, it's up to you. Now, the final variation to this build is going to be just swapping Argent Ordnance to Rage of the Warmind. So everything that I've just talked about, if you really don't like Argent Ordnance, you could just swap it to Rage of the Warmind. Do this if you find that you're not really getting the full advantage of Argent Ordnance and you would much rather focus on Ad Clear / Warmind cells. Rage in conjunction with Wrath is going to allow your Warmind cells to create Warmind cells. And then on top of that, you're also going to be running Global Reach. So, I mean, you have literally the holy trinity of Warmind cell mods. Your Warmind cells are going to create Warmind cells. And of course, here at the end, I wanted to mention double slugs because I feel like I wouldn't be doing you all justice if I didn't. Double slugs, as most of you know, isn't something you should be running for general gameplay, but for very specific bosses, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, have you seen it melt Templar? It's crazy. The 2 slugs I use are Heritage and First In Last Out with Anarchy. This isn't really a build per se, as it's literally just 2 slug shotguns and Anarchy with Breach and Clear. The flow of this is to stick a boss with 2 Anarchy shots, which will activate Breach and Clear, and then just hot swap your slugs. I'm going to link in the description videos on how to hot swap on both M&K and controller in case you're unfamiliar with how it's done and you want to learn. And those are all of the builds with their variations that I'm currently using. Now, of course, because I wanted to be as inclusive as possible for every class, I didn't pair any of these builds up with certain subclasses and exotic armor. But if that sounds interesting, then let me know and I'll gladly make a video on certain builds for certain classes. Also, because I know that there's currently a war going on between Royal Entry users and Hezen users, if at any point I mention Hezens, but you like Royal Entry more, then go for it. I like both rockets, I just like Hezens more. Now, before you head out, let me know in the comments section what builds and loadouts you all are using. I'm curious, and if I like it enough, I might even make a video on it. You all have seriously given me some really good builds to think about in the past. With all that being said, if you enjoy my videos or have ever found them useful, then feel free to subscribe. Also, if you want increased god roll drops and maximum DPS, then use code myfi at gfuel.com. Thank you so much. And finally, if you enjoyed the video, then feel free to drop a like, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.